Neptown Tuner here. Help me out with the subscribe. I've been making videos on this thing, taking my time, but I actually do need to get this thing on the road for mobile repair. I was a little bit baffled by this thing because I've put in a rear main seal before I put this engine in. I got this engine from a junkyard, so all I did to it was a timing kit, rear main seal. I think I checked the water pump. It's got a junkyard alternator on it. It threw the serpentine belt, the accessory belt, so I did a bunch of videos on replacing stuff. I skipped the video on replacing the belt components, the tensioner and the idler. But after I got this thing started, I did a intercooler on it as well. It had a horrible, huge vacuum leak and it was running lumpy. So one of the fastest things you can do is take off this hose right here on the intake manifold, and you can plug that. And I should have filmed this as I was going, but I shouldn't even be filming this. I got to get this thing going. But you plug this, and then if it smooths out and runs good, then you know it. Well, you can typically tell it's a vacuum leak anyway, because a vacuum is something that happens on this side of the intake manifold. So if it was something that happened on the other side of the manifold, it would have different symptoms, but that's for different videos. So you plug this right here, and you're eliminating the whole entire vacuum system, because this breather system is very complex, and that's for a different video as well as a more in-depth video on catch can. And then I'm also going to do a performance modification breather system. So lots of stuff coming. I'm also going to do a video on how to smoke test this engine for vacuum leaks. And all this kind of stuff, even though it's just a 2.0T, this kind of stuff applies to all kinds of different engines and just mechanic tips in general. So definitely get subscribed. Lots of good stuff coming. So, long story short now, after I started this thing, you know, I did put an intercooler in it as well, so I quickly eliminated none of that was the issue. It was definitely a vacuum leak. I should also touch on this alternator and power steering pump. I did not change out this alternator. This is a junkyard alternator. This power steering pump, this is a swapped out one. I just swapped this one out from a known good vehicle, a 2011 Audi A5 Quattro. I was skeptical about this pump because whenever I had this core support off, I was spinning this pulley and it sounded like ball bearings were clacking together. So it doesn't fit properly. This hose right here, the elbow came out sideways, and this one, it comes out top. Luckily, this hose still fits relatively good, and I put different intake pipes on this anyway for the intercooler, but this one was completely clocked wrong. You see these factory holes right here? If I were to try to clock this one right with this factory hose, it's different than the A5. So this bolt, it's just a plunger and O-ring type fitting. All it needs to do is sit flush. So I just cocked it sideways and that bolt fit, and I wasn't satisfied with just one bolt. So I just had to half moon out a little bit of the flange on that side, and then that bolt fit really nice with probably about 70% of the bolt head covering the flange, whereas this one only has about 40% bolt head covering the flange. But it's going to be perfectly fine. It was a part that I had, and eventually I'll go ahead and buy like a $200 or $300 power steering pump, but I don't even have one right now. That's something that I have not seen issues with. I've only seen one other bad power steering pump in all of these 2 liters that I've messed with. The alternator is way more of an issue than the power steering pump. I've seen dozens of these alternators go bad. I've only seen one power steering pump go bad. I was still bleeding the coolant. Let's get to the main issue of this video, the main content, the main event. The vacuum leak on this vehicle turned out to be, I'll have to get a flashlight for you. Along with the vacuum leak, I did have a slight oil leak, and it was a slinging type leak. And I've never seen one of these front main seals go bad yet. It's always the rear main flanges that like to go bad. But I'm suspecting that when the belt came off, it wrapped around behind the pulley and it shredded that, I don't know if I can get closer up here, it shredded that front main crankshaft seal, and there's a little bit of rubber even back behind it. So I need to try to clean off that gear. I need to hurry up and put my special tool in there, because anytime you take that bolt off, it's imperative that you hold that intermediate gear down, because there's just 3 chains holding that gear into place right now. It could slip out if you could sneeze at it. So I'll show you how to change out that front main flange with the service position installed. First off, you're gonna want your special tools. You can get by with a nut or something, but I wouldn't necessarily try this with just the bolt. We've got this spacer here that we're gonna use. We're gonna put the spacer on the factory bolt, and then we're gonna screw it back in. This piece right here is the installer for the new seal. Part number such and such. Okay, so let's start by putting this spacer on this bolt. And then we're gonna roll this bolt up here. I took this 7mm out of this module for the cooling fans, and that gave me enough room to get up in there with my wrench and my special tool. I guess I'll touch on that a little bit later, but you're simply gonna screw this all the way in until it gets flush, until it stops. And after this, I'm gonna try to clean whatever remnants is. I'm gonna get that seal out of the way first so I have more room to clean that, so I'll take that back off. Now we're gonna need to get our 13mm wrench, preferably a flank drive wrench. So we got a couple different wrenches here. This is the flank drive wrench. You see how it has grooves and teeth that bite into the fastener? And then this is also the same exact brand of wrench, Snap-on, but it's not flank drive plus. It's just flank drive in the back. So if you see just flank drive, it might be talking about the back. It has to be flank drive plus to be on the front. So we're gonna use the fulcrum of the wrench head on this, and then the teeth of the flank drive plus, and we're simply going to stick it in here. It's hard to get you a good visual, but we're gonna stick it in here like this. This was one of my patented tricks. Stick it in here like so, and then just roll it back sideways. Maybe you have to go in here for another bite. And I've never tried this before with one hand and then a camera in my way, so maybe it's not working quite like it should. And it didn't bite very well. I'd really like to show you on camera, so I'm really gonna try one more time, even though I'm severely handicapped. Oh, look at that. It did come loose. It was the first pull as well. So now we're going to take this bolt out, and we're going to see. It'd be much easier to show you this if I had the service position still off, but at least now you know for a fact it can be done like this. Now I'm just going to get in there and carefully clean with a lint-free cloth that gear and around the edges and slide the new seal in. See how there's still a little bit of trash around the edges of the gear? That kind of stuff is not good to get into your engine to contaminate your oil and then start clogging stuff up. Clogging up little orifices and little ports. If you were selling this job, would you see that? And would you quote a drop oil pan and inspect and clean? I shouldn't be doing this with the bolt out. I really shouldn't. Boy, that's stuck behind the chain. That's stuck behind that oil pump chain. I'm gonna have to try to put the bolt in and roll the engine. when you go pulling this seal out of the box, don't go putting your finger in there and ripping it out, or don't touch the inside of the seal at all. You see a little bit of grease on there. I put some Seal Glide on there. Some of the seals come with a little bit of pre-grease on there, some of them don't. If they're dry, I always like to put something on the inside. Don't put anything on the outside that has a grippy edge to where it's supposed to sit in there and not be moved after install. So you don't want the outside to be slippery, just the inside. So now we got our special tool right here. We can go ahead and install it. Maybe we'll just use this light to hold that. And then we want to put the seal on. That's the face of the seal, that's the back side of the seal. The face of the seal goes in this tool like that because it gets installed correctly. And then we just got to toss it up into place and put the bolt in and screw it in. So we're going to toss it up in here. We're going to get it as flush as possible. It'll kind of sit there right now, but don't trust it. It could come down and break your nose. I did that with a flywheel one time. So we'll start it in as straight as possible. And then you're just going to go in there. If you're a baller and you got a 24mm ratchet wrench, that would be awesome. But I just got this big bulky socket wrench, so we're just going to screw it in all the way flush until it bottoms out. And we'll feel it bottom out. Oops. That jump, make you jump? Did you get scared there, buddy? Did you blink? Oh, how about that one? That time? Did they get you that time? Didn't get me. I'm not scared of nothing. It's about there. Right there. You don't need to actually tighten it. You just wait till it stops. And now we're going to unscrew it and pull it out. You don't need to see all that. But I'll go ahead and show you anyway. I have to unscrew it all the way and then bring it out here and then kind of tilt it out. See how it's sitting nice and flush? Now we need to clock this pulley correctly, folks. Do you see this triangle right here? You need to clock that pulley correctly, otherwise it's gonna wobble. You don't want wobbly pulleys with vacuum leaks. You just tried to fix a vacuum leak. So with your special tool in here, you see I have this long bar back here somewhere, all the way up here. So I've got this long bar special tool. I've got my cooling fan module removed, so I have room to get up in here, and then I can finish torquing it to spec, like so. That's the same way you remove it with this special tool. There's indentations inside this crankshaft pulley, and you slide that in there and then unscrew the bolt with your breaker bar. We get up in here and tighten down our cooling fan module again. It just simply rolls and clips into place, and then it's got this 7mm bolt